Hi, my name's Greg, and I'm an alcoholic. For over 32 years, ever since I was 18, I could get alcohol. I worked for a plumber, and working with the plumber, I could just go through the drive-through, and they saw me with the plumber truck. So after work, I could go and get beer, and it was easy, and I liked it. Um, my dad was an alcoholic, and I remember when I was 14, my parents got separated. He had his own place, and he had a bad episode and woke up in the middle of the projects with the rifle in his hand, in his lap. Didn't know how he got there, and the company he worked for, they got him into treatment, and it was right over the Thanksgiving holidays, and he was supposed to get out right after Thanksgiving. I'm like, why can't he come home for Thanksgiving? And they're like, oh no. So we had to have Thanksgiving there, but that was tough. And I thought I would never be an alcoholic. And I dabbled in drinking in high school, kind of a weekend warrior occasionally. Um, I was a shy kid, so it let me loosen up, so to speak. And I wasn't shy. So fast forwarding to um, when I was drinking with the plumber, I would go to my friends that were underage. I graduated high school before them, so I had the beer, started smoking some pot, and it was the life of the party. Cool. I'm a cool kid now. And wrecked a car. Not bad, just enough that it got me stuck on a telephone pole that was used for a mailbox pole. I got out of it and parked my car sideways, and the plumber was like, what happened? They're like, you can't be driving, and I lost that job. So I didn't get a ticket for that. Never had any consequences. Sold that car and ended up working for another's friend, parents that had a refrigeration company, and more drinking. We were going out of town every week in all parts of Florida, and I was, get off of work and you drink. Hey, we deserved it. But when I turned 21, I moved in with my grandparents on St. Pete Beach and really started drinking like 90-cent drafts before work, after work. I showed up to work. I didn't think it was a problem. I didn't see the consequences of it. And a friend of mine got a company in Texas, and I went to go work doing refrigeration in Texas and lasted there for 2.5 years. But got tired of moving every 90 days. We were at another store, but constantly drinking, saving no money, just working to drink, and got tired of it. Moved to my dad in Seattle, and he had been sober for 8 years, and divorced his third wife, and he'd started drinking again. And I'm like, oh, I'm 25, I can drink with my dad, and we had some good times, and still no real repercussions of drinking. And I while we were in Seattle for that period of time, we ended up moving to Vegas, and I got a job working in a plastics company and making 32-ounce cups. We had a company picnic out on Lake Mead, and rented a bunch of jet skis, and I got drunk and got lost out on this huge lake, ran out of gas, and there was like 8 of us. We rented jet skis, and they were looking for us, and I ended up on the Arizona side of the lake, and I got gas from the ranger, and they're like, wait for me. It's like, no, I got to take off. And I took off flying across the lake and somehow found out where the boat dock was, and come racing in there. And then the park ranger comes to us saying, you're speeding, we're going to give you a ticket. And my boss, he was drunk. He got into it with the ranger and ended up in handcuffs, and they pulled a gun on him. And, well, I didn't go back to work. I went on vacation the next day with my parents, with my dad and stepmom, and I'm like, I can't do this. So I went to Florida, back to my grandparents, and started bartending. And that was a lot of fun. But again, I had to drink in my mind to get on their level. And I lasted there 5 years at the Holiday Inn. Great job. And towards the end of my career there, I went out drinking. I had to work the night shift, and I went drinking out on the boat, and came to work drunk on a summer day, busy. I had to go up two half of flights of stairs to go get ice and bring it back, and our pool deck was up above ground. And when I came back down, those steps were wet, and I slipped and fell on my butt and hurt. Didn't say nothing, jumped up, I'm okay, I'm drunk. Next day I had 3 lines across my butt, bruises, hurting, barely walk. Went to the chiropractor, never turned it into accident report because I was drunk, and I started calling in off sick to work, and eventually got laid off, fired for that job. And so then I was about 30, and my dad had moved to Oregon with his new wife, and he was running a bar, and with his best friend, which is named Greg, who I'm named after, and I bartended there for a couple years, drinking, carrying on, and I couldn't do it. And my dad ended up getting on dialysis, and my back was hurting from falling on the stairs, and he was on dialysis and had a bag of drugs, and I had access to drugs, and I fell asleep at the bar, passed out, and went back to Florida. And when I was in Oregon, I was with a girl, and she had a baby, my son Kellen, and she didn't know who the dad was. And 4 years later, while I'm in Florida, I get the maternity test, and sure enough, I was the father. And now I have 4 years of back child support to pay. And now she's calling me going, I need your help. Come back to Oregon. Well, I knew at the time she was on meth. Well, she was still on meth. And I dabbled it with her, but she was way far gone. But who's judging? And so I went back to Oregon to help raise my son. But how can you raise a son when you're an alcoholic? And I wanted to call child services so bad, but I didn't have the courage. I mean, I kept the place clean. He had food, but we weren't there mentally for him. And it was rough. And I lost my job at an oyster bar that I was there. while I was there with her, and she got me hooked up into a sober living place called Thugs Off Drugs, and I got sober for the first time in a long, long time, probably since my high school days, and had to do the 30 meetings in 30 days, and things were looking good, and it's a funny, not funny, a pretty awesome God moment I had when I was there. I was walking to the library looking for going to get on the computer, and there was some glass on the street, on the sidewalk, and I'm like, oh, I didn't have a bag, so I put it off to the side, so it wasn't on the sidewalks because they rode their bikes a lot, and I just got this glass off the. Not a minute later, my boss calls me from the oyster bar that I worked at. He goes, "Hey, are you ready to come back to work?" I'm like, "What?" And yeah, it was about 4 months after I'd gotten laid off. She was like, "Come back to work for me." I'm like, "Yes, ma'am." And I stayed sober vaguely. It always progressed. I mean, yeah, one beer after work. Okay, you're good. You can have one, and two, and three, and then I'm drinking at home, and it all snowballs again. And I think I have the record from getting hired and fired from that lady about 5 times. And it always messed with me because I could do my work fairly well when I'm drunk, but I guess I was that much better when I was sober. Because they would tell me, "Oh, Greg, these cooks can't cook like you even if you are drunk." But I know better now that I wasn't 100% of how I should have been. And so my last stint, about 4 years ago while I was there, I got fired again, and the cook that I was working with, how I got to Dayton, said, "Hey, we got a food truck opportunity in Dayton. We can go up and down the East Coast, make lots of money." And so I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it." And it was right after the tornadoes hit Dayton. Got here right after 4th of July, and I get dropped off here in Dayton at one of his friend's house, and it turned out to be a trap house. The guy was selling drugs from upstairs. He had no air conditioning except in his room. And I was there for like 2 weeks, not knowing what to do. No phone, out of food stamps. Crazy. And I reached out to my mom, and she found St. Vincent de Paul Gateway, and I got a ride there, and started working immediately when I got in there. I got into Labor Works, and I was working every day, 5 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning, get up, van would catch us at 5, go to work. Hey, all right, I got drinking money. And so little did I know, at Labor Works, they breathalyze you in the morning. So I would have to drink early at night, stop drinking by 8 or 9, make sure you had food in you, or that morning when you came into work, you weren't getting a job. They didn't always breathalyze you. Sometimes they did. I did this for almost 2 years. But oh yeah, and while I was at Gateway, they stole my phone, they stole my ID. It was hell. So I got a U-Haul unit about 6 months after I was in Gateway on Salem, and it was temperature controlled 5x5 unit, and I had accumulated some stuff, too much stuff that you could keep at Gateway. So I got this 5x5 unit and started living out of it. It had a bathroom there, and Well, I'm taller than 5 foot, so I I would curl sideways in there and sleep in the unit, and I had some sleeping bags and stuff, and Labor Works was just down the street from it, but I was working a lot and tired and hurting, so I'd leave my feet out, and they'd come and show the place, and they're like, "Hey, get out of here! We're gonna kick you out. You're gonna lose your spot." So I found a bando a couple blocks down, and I was living in a bando for 6 months or so. Still had my U-Haul unit so I could get my clothes and stuff, but not ideal. Well, my friend was a Gateway, and he got a place on Huffman. He was 55 and over. And he's like, "It's cold, Greg. Come live with me." So I lived with him for about a year. And in the first 6 months, he stopped working at Labor Works. I was the only one bringing in money. He was getting this place for free. And I ended up getting canned from Labor Works for showing up to a job without going through Labor Works, without doing the breathalyzer. I was already on a ticket. They're like, "No, you can't do that. You're out of here." And so I'm looking at no job. I had no ID. They'd stole my ID when I was at Gateway, and I'd never gotten it back. Never was drunk all the time. So the last 6 months, without having any work, I did plasma, and I wasn't eating real well, drinking what I could, and before I got into Woodhaven, well, this year before I got into Woodhaven, when I was living with my buddy, I got into the hospital twice for, I don't know if it's alcohol poisoning or alcohol withdrawal, but my body shut down and I was shook. Once on the job at Labor Works and once at Labor Works. Once I was at ConAgra doing Slim Jims and I just fell out, and not good. But I still kept on drinking. So now that I'm jobless, doing this plasma thing, my blood got so clotted up that I had to take 2 months off. And it was right before my birthday in December, and I got my birthday money and got really drunk and found myself in the hospital again, and on the 20th of December of 2021. And I called my mom about 3 days after I kind of came to. I was on like suicide watch. They always had a nurse with me because I didn't know how I got there. God brought me there, and that's all I know, because I don't know. It was all a blur. So I contacted my mom, and she told me about treatment. Oh, I just do a 30-day. She's like, "No, Greg, you need more than 30 days. There's this place called Woodhaven." I'm like, "Huh? Well, okay, whatever. I'll do whatever it takes." And but she goes, but because COVID was just kind of in the middle of it, she said I had to go to this other place, Access, first and get some shots. So I get out of the hospital and they send me to Access, and I get there after 5 o'clock and they're like, "We can't take you. There's nobody to admit you." And I'm like, "What?" So I walked from Access all the way back to the hospital. Somehow, when I went into the hospital, the first time I had 3 beers on me, and they gave them back to me. I didn't have my wallet. I didn't have any cigarettes, but I had 3 beers. So I pounded those, looking for butts on the way, cigarette butts, just miserable. And it was cold. It was the Christmas Eve of Christmas Eve. And I walk all the way back to the hospital thinking I'm suicidal. I'm ready to jump in the river. They let me into the emergency room, and I get to see it's about 6 o'clock at night, and it's crazy. I hear this one guy's just going off the wall. He won't sit down. They keep telling him to sit down. He's going, "Just give me a shot. Just give me a shot." And just craziness. And then another, I hear in the background, we got a stab wound in the front, in the chest, and in the back. Emergency, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, whoa, I'm like, I ain't got it that bad. I mean, I'm not suicidal. I just need to really hunker down. And they finally get me into almost like a cell. It wasn't nothing like when I was in hospital before that. That 4 days when they had me on IV and getting better. They're like, are you still? So I'm like, no. They're like, here, go to Gateway and call Woodhaven and get into Woodhaven. I'm like, okay. So it was Christmas Eve at that point, and I couldn't get into Woodhaven, and they're like, it was a Friday, so I had to wait till that Monday. Well, I didn't get into Woodhaven until New Year's Eve, 12/31/21. Always remember that day, and saved my life. And I wasn't nervous. I knew I needed it. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that's where my recovery started for real. All the other times was the girlfriend told me, or I got a DUI. Oh yeah, I had 2 DUIs. But it was always court ordered. It was never for me. And I just turned 50 this year. I was just turned 49 when I put myself in and said, yeah, it's time to do this right. I need a new life. My son will be 18 this year. Woodhaven saved my life. And I found Good Shepherd. They used to pick us up when I was at Woodhaven, and talked to the guys and heard about donating cars and doing service work, and like, hey, I can get my license and get my act together. And I get here and it's like, slow down. Let's work on your recovery. I'm like, okay. And I had to let go and let God. And that's what works for me. Is before I would run and go get drunk and forget all my feelings, and I don't have to do that anymore. I can pray and meditate, listen to a good song, and levels me out. I'm not chemically imbalanced as I was before, and it works for me. I have 14 months today, and feels really good. I got my license. I haven't had my driver's license in over 10 years. I mean, God's been looking out for me, and I love it.